He fired me the same day he proposed to my best friend. So I disappeared. 6 months later I owned his company, exposed every lie he ever told, and made him my secretary. My name is Elise Caldwell, remember it? Because they won't forget it. There's something about turning 30 that feels ceremonial. The end of your 20s is supposed to come with a ribbon, a toast, a final burst of something wild before you settle into sharp certainty. I thought my 30th birthday would feel like that. It didn't. It felt like a funeral. Not because of the decorations. Those were beautiful. Warm golds, glass candlelight, arrangements of white hydrangeas and blush roses. The rooftop of the Clarion Hotel glowed like it had been dipped in champagne. I had designed every detail myself, down to the playlist, which featured soft jazz remixes and instrumental Coldplay. I thought it was the perfect celebration for the life I'd spent a decade building. I was wrong. At 9:46 p.m., everything I thought I knew about love, friendship, and trust was dragged out into the open and publicly destroyed. And it happened in front of everyone. Mason was wearing the navy suit I'd helped him pick out for his last investor pitch. The tie I bought him on our second anniversary. His smile was rehearsed, but I knew him well enough to know when he was nervous. I thought he was going to propose to me. Of course I did. We'd been together for 4 years. Lived together for 2. I had designed our future in my head 1,000 times. So when he asked for everyone's attention and the music faded, I felt my heart flutter with anticipation. I thought he would walk toward me. Instead he turned away, walked to Ivy, my best friend, and got down on one knee. There was a moment, maybe 2 seconds, maybe 10, when my mind couldn't process what was happening. Ivy froze, one hand fluttering to her mouth in a practiced gesture. Her eyes were wide. Then tears. A gasp. A high-pitched, trembling yes. The crowd erupted in applause. Champagne flutes clinked. Someone whistled. A few guests shouted congratulations. I just stood there, still as stone, frozen. They didn't look in my direction. No one did. I was standing less than 10 feet away beside the candles I had placed with care, next to the dessert table that featured Ivy's favorite lemon cake, because she didn't like chocolate and I'd wanted her to enjoy the party. That detail hit me like a slap. The cake wasn't for me. Nothing had been. I didn't cry. Not right away. I set my glass down, untouched, and walked away from the table. No one stopped me. Down the staircase, through the lobby, out the glass doors. The night air hit my face like a storm. I didn't speak to the valet. I didn't look back. I called a rideshare and waited in silence. The driver was kind enough not to ask questions. My apartment was dark when I entered. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I slipped off my shoes at the door and walked barefoot across the polished floors. Every sound echoed. My life had once felt full here, now it felt like a showroom. Cold, hollow. I sat on the edge of my bed, still in my dress. A soft champagne satin gown I'd picked out weeks ago, thinking it would shimmer under rooftop lighting. I hadn't noticed if it did. My phone was buzzing nonstop in my purse. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again, more insistently. Eventually I took it out. Ivy. 9:57 p.m. It happened so fast. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I hope you understand. Broken heart. 10:01 p.m. Elise, please don't be upset. I never meant to hurt you. I just followed my heart. Followed his heart. Followed his heart. I laughed. Once. A single dry breath of sound. Then I placed the phone face down on the nightstand and stared at my reflection in the bedroom mirror across from me. I didn't look broken. That bothered me. I wanted to see proof of the damage. I wanted to see something unrecognizable. But I just looked calm. Too calm. I reached up, pulled out the pins from my hair and let it fall to my shoulders. My fingers were shaking. The sensation felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. I whispered out loud as if saying it might make it real. They planned this. It didn't feel like a betrayal of the moment. It felt like a betrayal in slow motion. Like they'd rehearsed it. Maybe they had. Maybe this party was never about me at all. I stood and walked to the closet. I pulled out a leather-bound journal from the top shelf, one I hadn't touched in over a year. It was filled with sketches, lists, fragments of dreams I used to chase before I met Mason. I had been a strategist once. A builder. The kind of woman who built companies out of raw ideas and ambition. Before love had softened me into someone who spent her energy building others' dreams instead of her own. I opened the journal to a fresh page, stared at it, then wrote 3 words across the top in ink so hard it bled through the paper. It ends here. I stayed up all night, packing, sorting, deleting photos, email drafts, old voicemails, blocking numbers, downloading bank statements, not out of rage, out of something colder. Precision. I was done mourning. I was done waiting for an apology. I would not stand in their wedding crowd pretending to wish them well. I would not be the woman people pitied. I would vanish from their lives entirely. Let them wonder. Let them search. Let them guess. At dawn, I opened the window to let in the cold winter air. It stung against my skin, but I didn't move. I felt stripped bare. But underneath the emptiness was something sharper. Still, I had no plan yet. No roadmap. Only this. I would disappear. And when I came back, I wouldn't be Elise Winters anymore. I left the apartment at 4 a.m. on a Tuesday. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Every photo had already been burned or boxed. My name removed from leases, utilities cancelled. My number was deactivated. Social media accounts wiped. The storage unit where I left my old furniture bore no identifying label. Elise Winters was officially gone. By the time the city stirred to life that morning, I was someone else. The name I chose was Lena Carr. It wasn't random. Lena was my grandmother's middle name, a woman who used to say, "If you want to disappear, walk confidently." No one notices confidence. They only notice fear. Carr came from a substitute English teacher in high school who told me once, "You're too sharp for people to like you. Use it anyway." Together the name felt cold, clean, practical, and I needed to be all 3. The first thing I did was rent a 1-bedroom studio above a laundromat on the south side of Chicago. The water ran slow, the radiator screamed every night, and the walls smelled faintly of detergent. It was perfect. I lived like a ghost for the first month. I didn't speak unless spoken to. I paid in cash. My clothes were simple. Button-downs, loose trousers, no logos, no jewelry. I changed the way I walked. The way I held my phone. Even the way I breathed in public. I cut my hair blunt at the shoulders and dyed it 2 shades darker. No one looked at me twice. That was the point. Every morning I woke at 5 o'clock. I made tea and opened a fresh notebook. Not the one from before. This one was unmarked, gray, bound in cloth. It became the most important thing I owned. I wrote in it relentlessly. Names, maps, shell company structures, liquidity ratios. I sketched the foundation of what I would build, not just the architecture but the collapse. I didn't want just to rise again. I wanted to ensure that the people who stepped on me felt the ground shift beneath them. By day I rebuilt my resume, tailored not to impress but to disappear into. Lena Carr had no major recognitions. No viral successes. No public presence. Her portfolio was understated. 1 distressed merger, a few freelance research stints, and a private consulting gig for a firm that no longer existed. But what she lacked in flair, she made up for in subtle credibility. She was just skilled enough to pass. Just quiet enough not to be questioned. I applied to 7 firms. 3 responded. 1 offered an interview. Falcrest Holdings, a mid-tier venture capital group on the outskirts of the Magnificent Mile. It wasn't flashy. But it was just close enough to money and just far enough from scrutiny. Perfect. The interview took place in a glass conference room overlooking a slate-gray winter skyline. The man sitting across from me was named Mitchell Kerr, managing director. He had the face of someone who spent more time in spreadsheets than in strategy. "Ms. Carr," he said, flipping through my resume. "You worked for Lunan Partners?" I consulted briefly. "Debt structuring for a media acquisition." Very quiet. He nodded, uninterested. "And what makes you want to return to capital firms now?" "I want to be useful," I said simply. "I know where to find value others overlook." He tapped his pen twice. 2 days later I got the job. I started at Falcrest Holdings as a junior market analyst. Entry-level in title. Invisible in practice. Which was exactly how I wanted it. No one asked me personal questions. I kept my desk organized, my head down, and my emails prompt. I didn't lunch with the other analysts. I didn't go out for Friday drinks. I didn't flirt, laugh, or linger in break rooms. But I watched. I listened. I absorbed everything. Falcrest had decent money but no soul. The kind of firm that missed the best deals because they were always 5 months behind on real-world instinct. The partners didn't understand market psychology. They just watched charts. It didn't matter. I wasn't there to be promoted. I was there to observe. To study how venture capital moved beneath the surface. To learn the exact moment a company started to rot from within. After my 3rd week, I opened a brokerage account under a new identity and began setting up my own structure. It started with Verdant Echo Holdings, a trust one formed months prior in the British Virgin Islands. Through that, I created a Delaware-based LLC called Car Capital Advisory. Car Capital didn't operate. It didn't produce. It didn't need to. It just owned. From there, I used Car Capital to create Thorn and Lynn, a phony venture studio with a website, a domain-registered email, and 3 fake partners with stock photos for faces. Then I moved $1.2 million, my own liquid assets, into Thorn and Lynn via structured transfers. The money was clean. The ownership was untraceable. On paper, it looked like 3 anonymous angel investors backing early-stage companies. In reality, it was all me. I kept building. Within weeks, I had 3 additional holding companies, each registered under different tax shelters, each with a specific purpose. Halcyon Depth, for absorbing high-risk liabilities. Emirelite Ventures, for funneling capital into undervalued tech assets. Echo Argyle, for public-facing brand partnerships when the time came. Each had a legal address, a phone number, and a neutral website that said nothing while looking like it said everything. To the outside world, they were mysterious, well-funded, and careful. That's all they needed to be. It was during the 4th week at Falcrest that I began watching them again. Mason Quinn. Ivy Hart. Insight Vault had changed branding twice in 3 months. The website now featured buzzwords like predictive analytics and AI-driven customer behavior modeling. Ivy's LinkedIn profile had updated too. Chief Communications Officer, Insight Vault. Building transparency through strategic disruption. She always did like big words with empty meaning. They were giving interviews now. Hosting panels. Talking about scaling consciousness and disruptive intelligence. It was all garbage. But their media footprint was growing. Which meant they were trying to look bigger than they were. Which meant they were desperate. Which meant they were perfect. At night, I returned to my notebook. The pages were dense now. Flowcharts, organizational trees, keyword triggers. I wrote in shorthand only I understood. Color-coded by risk, time, and damage potential. Every night I listed 5 things. 1. What I built today. 2. What they gained today. 3. Where they were vulnerable. 4. What public record missed. 5. What Elise would have ignored but Lena would not. It became ritual. It became control. And after each list I ended with the same words. But not yet. Sometimes I wondered what they thought had happened to me. Did they wonder where I went? Did they tell people I'd moved abroad? Did they even notice how quietly I disappeared? Or did they tell themselves the story most people prefer? That I was too weak to recover. That I had melted into irrelevance. That they had won. Good. Let them. Let them think I was buried. Let them enjoy the illusion. Because in the silence I was building something. And when it was time to return, I wouldn't knock on their door. I'd own the building it was in. It began with a single email. Sent on a quiet Wednesday morning at 7:14 a.m., before the markets stirred and before anyone had a chance to build their defenses for the day. It came from a neutral address with a blank subject line and a clean signature. Dear Mr. Quinn, I represent a discreet capital group seeking early-stage partnerships with founder-led tech firms. Your work with Insight Vault has come to our attention. We are interested in a conversation regarding long-term support and shared growth. If you're open to private discussion, please let me know a convenient time. Best regards, Car. Managing Partner, Riverlight Equity. I crafted the message with surgical precision. Intriguing but vague, confident but deferential. The kind of email that landed not in spam but straight into the heart of ego. Mason responded 46 minutes later. Hi Ms. Carr. Appreciate the interest. Would be glad to chat. Let me know your availability. I'll make time. Bess. Mason. Of course he would. I set the first meeting for Friday. 4 p.m. Late enough in the day that his team would be gone, early enough that it didn't feel desperate. It would be a video call. I didn't want to be physically present, not yet. The illusion needed a little more distance. I sat at my apartment's kitchen table, laptop open, camera angled perfectly. Hair in a tight bun. Minimal makeup. Dark blazer, pearl earrings. I looked like wealth dressed in restraint. He entered the call a minute late, hair pushed back, blazer slightly askew. "Mason Quinn," he said, flashing a self-sure smile. "Pleasure to meet you, Ms. Carr. Please, call me Lena." He chuckled. "Only if you call me Mason." We were already playing the roles. He started by pitching his product. Insight Vault, he said, was entering phase 2. AI tools, marketing prediction, real-time consumer feedback integration. "We're building what Nielsen will wish it had invented." I let him talk. Let him brag. Let him believe I was unfamiliar with all the ways his last prototype had crashed and burned 6 months ago. "I admire your ambition," I said when he finished. He relaxed slightly. "It's not just ambition. We've got real traction now. Real clients." He was lying. His tone told me. So did the fatigue under his eyes. "Tell me," I said, tilting my head slightly, "what do you need most? Capital, infrastructure, or trust?" He blinked. The question caught him. "Trust," he said finally. "Capital's easy. But long-term belief from smart money, that's rare." I let that hang in the air. Then nodded once. "Then maybe we're a good fit." I let the conversation last 23 minutes. Long enough to intrigue, short enough to leave him wanting more. "Send me your deck," I said, already knowing what it would contain. "I will," he said quickly. "And our product demo too." "Perfect. Let's talk next week. I'll review and revert." He leaned forward slightly. "May I ask, how did you come across Insight Vault?" I smiled politely. We keep our ears close to the ground. I didn't give him more. Control wasn't just about what I said. It was about what I withheld. He sent the deck that evening. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew every word inside. For the next 3 days I left him alone. Silence is a psychological scalpel. It cuts in places flattery never could. I knew Mason. I knew his need to be wanted, validated, chased. On Monday morning I replied. "Deck reviewed. We'd like to present a proposal for a partnership. Not traditional venture. More aligned, more long-term. Would you be open to a call this afternoon?" He accepted within 6 minutes. That afternoon I introduced him to Riverlight Equity. I explained it simply. A discreet capital firm founded by ex-founders and silent legacy families with long investment horizons and little interest in PR. "We've built a portfolio of 7 quiet companies," I said. "We're looking for one flagship brand. Something future-facing. Something like Insight Vault." He listened wide-eyed. I continued. "We don't believe in overexposure. Our structure allows us to inject capital while giving founders operational control." "Operational control," he repeated like a man tasting something sweet. "Piostasio. But we provide the scaffolding. Advisory board, compliance, capital injection over 3 phases. You remain the face. We build the spine." "And equity?" he asked carefully. "Minority ownership for us," I lied. "Majority public-facing control remains yours." He nodded slowly. "That's generous. We don't invest in projects. We invest in people." I paused. Let him speak next. "Ivy would love this," he said. And there was the name, like a trigger pulled in a soundproof room. My face remained perfectly composed. But in my chest something curled. He kept talking. "She's been pushing us to find smarter capital. Something leaner than the last round. Not vultures." "I'd be glad to meet her," I said. I wouldn't. But I would pretend. For now. By Thursday we had scheduled an in-person meeting. He offered to meet at Insight Vault's office. I declined. Neutral ground was safer. I booked a glass conference room in a boutique co-working space downtown under a fake consulting brand. Argyle Methods. At 10 a.m. on the dot Mason arrived. He wore cologne he couldn't afford and a watch I knew he'd borrowed from a friend. The polish was surface deep, but that was always Mason. Just enough gloss to catch light, never enough weight to cast shadow. "Miss Carr," he said. "Lena," I corrected again. He grinned. "Right. Lena." He introduced Ivy like she was royalty. "Lena, this is Ivy Hart, our chief of communications, and the real brains behind everything." She smiled like a woman who thought she'd already won. I stood, extended my hand. Her grip was weaker than I remembered. Pleasure, I said. I've heard just enough. The conversation that followed was a ballet of lies. I presented Riverlight's structure. Ivy nodded at the right times. Mason dropped startup lingo like confetti. I offered numbers, strategic ones. Conservative enough to sound real. Attractive enough to feel dangerous. By the end of the meeting, Ivy was nearly glowing. "You're exactly what we've been looking for," she said. I smiled. I knew. They left the building holding hands. I watched from behind tinted glass. The sight of them didn't enrage me. It amused me. Because they walked out thinking they'd just charmed their next big investor. But they had no idea who they were talking to. And even less idea what they'd just invited in. That night I sat alone on my mattress, notebook open. I drew a new diagram. Phase 1. Infiltration, complete. Underneath it I wrote 2 words. Let him believe. From the outside, Insight Vault was growing. Mason and Ivy had announced the partnership with Riverlight Equity via a slick LinkedIn post. Caption read, "Proud to share our new strategic partnership with Riverlight Equity. The future is now, and Insight Vault is ready to lead the charge into predictive intelligence. Let's build the future together." There was a photo attached. Mason in a tailored blue suit, Ivy in cream, leaning slightly into him, hand on his forearm. Both smiling like they owned the sky. The image made it into a couple of mid-tier tech blogs. The kind desperate for buzz. To the public it looked like a win. Behind the curtain I was already tightening the noose. The first move came through the advisory board. I had promised Mason support, structure, and flexibility. What I gave him were 3 Riverlight advisors, each carefully selected not for what they knew, but for what they could fake. Inigo Vega, a charismatic startup veteran with exactly 0 successful exits. Judith Claremont, an ex-communications strategist, who had once been sued for PR manipulation. Alex Zhou, a silent Chinese investor whose actual name was Kevin and whose accent he practiced in the mirror. I paid them generously, under aliases, through Halcyon Depth, one of my layered shell firms. Their job was simple. Nod. Smile. Ask bad questions. And occasionally, make disastrous recommendations that sounded genius on the surface. The brilliance was in the confidence. When people believe you're powerful, they assume your ideas are too. Mason welcomed them like trophies. He added Nico to his Slack. Let Judith reword his investor pitch. Offered Alex full insight into their backend AI modeling, which I already knew was based on an outdated codebase Ivy found through a freelance coder in Ukraine. It didn't matter. Nothing they built would last. My advisors didn't need to fix anything. They were there to let it rot. The second move was budget redirection. Mason had asked for $400,000 in runway to scale outreach and expand the brand. I gave him $500,000. He never questioned why. That extra $100,000 was designated, quietly, by one of my internal compliance firms as a restricted marketing fund, with intentionally vague restrictions. Ivy, predictably, took it and used it to sponsor a Women in Tech gala under Insight Vault's name. On the surface it looked brilliant. Behind the scenes she'd violated a spending clause I hadn't told her existed. My legal team documented everything. Next came the staffing shifts. Through a third-party recruiting agency I quietly controlled, I had Ivy hire 2 new junior PR managers. Both underqualified, both oddly impressive in interviews, both with backgrounds easy enough to fake. Their resumes were watermarked and vague. They were actors. I paid them double to create chaos under her name. One scheduled duplicate interviews and told press outlets conflicting event times. The other leaked internal documents to reporters, citing Ivy's poor communication chain. Within 6 weeks, Ivy's reputation started to stutter. Her name no longer trended with visionary. It started trending with inconsistent. But I didn't stop there. Because chaos, when done right, is exponential. I created a mock website, a parody of Insight Vault's main page, and paid a shady SEO agency to rank it just low enough to be discovered by curious investors. The site was a mirror. Same color scheme. Slightly off quotes. The tagline, predicting futures we can't build. Just enough cynicism to cast doubt. Just enough similarity to create whispers. Inside Foulcrest Holdings I stayed silent. I was still just Lena, the efficient analyst no one invited to lunch. No one knew I was running 3 burner companies, funding a collapsing startup, and playing puppet master to a man who once replaced me with the woman who wore my earrings like trophies. Kept my days clean. My nights, methodical. Every night before bed I tracked the chaos like a scientist. One night, a mason changed their project management system for the 4th time in a quarter. Ivy canceled a podcast appearance after a minor internal crisis. One of the actor juniors tweeted that Ivy was a tyrant in a silk dress. It went mildly viral. She deleted it in 20 minutes. But 20 minutes was enough. I screenshotted it, printed it, filed it in a folder I titled Reputation, Phase 1. Mason emailed me the next morning. Lena, quick question. What do you think about adding a few more advisors? Ivy thinks we need stronger female voices on the board. Thoughts? I replied politely. Let's revisit next quarter. Focus now should be streamlining operations, not expanding them. He agreed. He always did. Mason didn't want friction. He wanted approval. And I knew exactly how to give it, just enough to keep him hungry. At this point, Ivy began pushing for a full product launch. They were calling it VaultScan 3.0. There was no version 1.0. But their arrogance had no version control. The product wasn't ready. It wasn't even stable. But Ivy, ever the branding machine, had promised 3 speaking engagements and a tech demo for the quarter's end. And Mason, unwilling to disappoint her, agreed. I pretended to raise concerns. He brushed them aside. Perfect. They wanted to raise another $2 million from Riverlight. I told them it would be reviewed internally and returned in 2 weeks. Meanwhile, I informed our silent partners, none of whom actually existed, that this next round would be considered conditional upon compliance review. That review would of course find issues. BuzzFeed Tech picked it up. Then Forbes with a brutal headline. From darling to disaster. How a startup's media star lost the room. Mason tried damage control. He hosted a webinar. Only 42 people logged in. 15 dropped off in the first 5 minutes. They didn't trust him anymore. The final domino of this phase came via a podcast. One Ivy had appeared on 3 weeks before the launch. In it she had confidently stated, VaultScan is fully operational and being deployed across 3 Fortune 500 companies. One of those companies issued a statement. We have no current partnership with Insight Vault. Another confirmed it was in exploratory conversations, but not engaged. The third? It didn't respond at all. But that was enough. The host released a correction episode. The words hit like shrapnel. We want to clarify. Based on recent news, some statements made in episode 213 appear to be exaggerated or factually incorrect. Ivy's credibility didn't just drop. Cracked. I didn't celebrate. Not outwardly. I sat in my apartment with the lights off, laptop glowing softly, reading every line. Then I opened my black notebook. Added a new page. Phase 2. Collapse, initiated. Below it I wrote. Internal trust breakdown. Illegal ambiguity introduced. Public narrative shifting. Ivy destabilized. Mason distracted. And then at the bottom. Next, starve the air. Because now that the house had started to burn, all I had to do was close every window. And wait for them to choke. I withheld the wire transfer on a Monday morning. They were expecting $2 million. They got silence. At 8:47 a.m., Ivy sent a polite nudge. Just checking on the Phase 2 funds, expected today. Do let us know if any delay. Smiley face. I ignored it. At 10:14 Mason followed up. Lena, can you confirm transfer? We're coordinating onboarding with 2 partners and wanted to stay ahead of timing. Still nothing. By 1 p.m. he called. I didn't answer. By 2 p.m. Riverlight's autoresponse kicked in. Thank you for your message. We are currently reviewing internal financial integrity for all Q3 allocations. You will be contacted shortly by a compliance representative. I watched the delivery notification appear. And imagined the exact moment they began to sweat. They tried to remain calm publicly. Mason posted a quote graphic on LinkedIn that read, "Storms are only dangerous to those who forget they can swim." Ivy retweeted it with a handshake emoji. But internally, they were already drowning. By Wednesday, 3 Insight Vault staff had quit. One was a software engineer I had helped recruit 9 months earlier. Brilliant, undervalued, and now poached via a fake company I set up for exactly this purpose. Her exit email was cold. Thank you for the opportunity. However, due to strategic misalignment and shifting values, I'll be transitioning out. She CC'd half the advisory board. I printed it, pinned it, labeled it, crack number 7. Mason emailed me again. Lena, we're facing a few small fires. Really hoping we can connect this week. Can I call you tonight? I replied 12 hours later. Mason, as outlined in our previous agreement, Q2 funding is contingent on the full delivery of accurate product architecture, partner verification, and resolution of public discrepancies related to product claims. We are in review mode only. No funds will be released until compliance closes. Car. He didn't respond right away. But Ivy did. Hi Lena. Would really appreciate the chance to talk. Just woman to woman. We're being hit from all sides. Some of it unfair. Please let me know if there's anything we can clarify. Her tone was sweet. Desperate almost. I let her wait 24 hours. Then responded. Please refer to our legal channels moving forward. On Friday, Riverlight issued a public statement through a ghost spokesperson. As of this week, Riverlight Equity has paused all Insight Vault capital activity pending an internal performance review. It was 2 lines long. But it spread like oil on water. TechBeat, VentureWire, and even TechCrunch picked it up. The headline wrote itself. Riverlight halts funding to failing startup after demo collapse. Within 48 hours, 2 of Insight Vault's angel investors pulled out. One was from Dubai. The other from Austin. Both cited concerns over governance. I had spoken to both of them, anonymously, 2 weeks earlier. At this point, Ivy lost her polish. Her next press interview was visibly shaken. I's puffy voice clipped. She stammered when the host asked, "What exactly is going on with Riverlight?" She answered, "It's a process. This is normal. Tech evolves fast. And investors sometimes misunderstand trajectory." It made the front page of Reddit's startup subreddit with the caption, "Never let PR run the business." The top comment had 8,000 upvotes. She just learned money doesn't buy timelines. Mason meanwhile tried to recover. He began cold emailing second-tier investors, old contacts, failed VC firms, and advisors who'd attended 2 networking events and called themselves capitalists. None of them bit. Because I'd made sure they wouldn't. 2 weeks earlier I'd started a quiet background email campaign, posing as an anonymous due diligence consultant, warning of serious red flags around Insight Vault solvency. I didn't accuse them. I merely suggested caution. No one wants to be the idiot who backed a collapsing company, especially one whose dirty laundry was already flapping in public wind. Then came the audit. Or rather, the threat of one. I had Riverlight's general counsel send Ivy and Mason a formal notification. Please prepare all financial statements, marketing decks, contractor contracts, and public communication records from the past 3 quarters for internal audit. Our office will begin review in 5 business days. It was enough. I didn't need the audit. Just the chaos that came from preparing for one. Ivy panicked. Mason crumbled. They spent 4 sleepless days rebuilding decks, cleaning up spreadsheets, removing conflicting dates from websites, deleting quotes that had sounded impressive but meant nothing. They tried to backdate developer payments. I caught it. I let them. Then quietly forwarded the transactions to an anonymous journalist. The story broke the next Thursday. Insight Vault falsifies expense trail ahead of rumored audit. No sources named. But the damage was irreversible. An industry whisper became a siren. By the following Monday, 4 enterprise clients delayed their trial contracts with Insight Vault. Ivy tweeted a tone-deaf reaction. "Our haters don't stop us. They just prove we're ahead of the curve." She deleted it 3 hours later. Too late. The screenshots were everywhere. Internally, Insight Vault went on lockdown. But the employees weren't loyal anymore. Mason's CTO stopped showing up to stand-ups. One of Ivy's interns created a TikTok series called "My Boss is the Female Adam Newman." Got 2 million views. The comments were brutal. Bro, she called herself a visionary while the demo app crashed. All buzzwords, no build. I'd rather be broke than work for another startup like this. And I sat in a clean co-working space, sipping espresso, watching the dominoes I'd spent 6 months placing fall. one graceful topple at a time. But I wasn't done yet. Because I still hadn't revealed myself. Not even a hint. I was still Lena Carr, the neutral investor who made a reasonable pause in funding. Nothing more. Yet. That night I opened my black notebook. The collapse section was full. So I turned the page. And wrote slowly. Phase 3, exposure begins. Beneath it. Public confidence, shattered. Investor trust, gone. Staff morale, cratered. Legal ambiguity, triggered. Ivy's narrative, broken. And Mason's desperation, weaponized. At the bottom I underlined one word. No. Because it was time they finally saw what they'd never expected. That the woman they discarded hadn't vanished. She'd been planning their extinction. The folder was labeled, Extinction Package. Inside it were 34 PDF files. Each one titled like a ticking clock. Vault scan _ partnership _ fraud emails.pdf. Investor _ misrepresentation .pdf. I _dem _ source sampling.pdf. Backdated _ vault.pdf. Staff _ exit _ interviews unreleased. .pdf. Internal _ compliance _ violations q2.pdf. It took me 27 minutes to zip and encrypt the package. Then I created a clean Proton Mail account. clarity.archive@proton.me. And I began sending. First to reporters I knew from Ivy's old media circuits. People who once called her visionary. Attached you'll find documents obtained through inside whistleblowers. They suggest gross misrepresentation and possible securities fraud at Insight Vault. Several investors remain unaware. Consider this the story you were too early to write the first time. Then to the SE. Then to a tech-focused legal blog known for breaking white-collar collapse stories. I didn't say who I was. I didn't need to. The evidence screamed louder than identity ever could. The first story dropped 72 hours later. Leaked emails suggest Insight Vault falsified key partnerships. By Linnea Rhodes, Techlens Weekly. The article was merciless. It cited internal emails between Ivy and Mason where they rehearsed language for a press release about secured contracts, with partners they never signed. Quotes from Ivy included, "Just say they're on board. By the time it matters, they will be." The story reached 100K views by noon. 500,000 by dinner. The next morning the follow-up hit. Documents reveal demo was faked using abandoned wireframes. This time screenshots were attached. Side-by-sides of the real app and the slideshow mock-up used during the launch. And just like that, the world saw. Mason tried denial. He posted a correction thread on X, formerly Twitter. Some misleading info is circulating regarding our product development cycle. We remain committed to transparency and are taking steps to correct misperceptions. The replies were savage. Bro, we saw the receipts. Imagine being this confident while lying on camera. You didn't get hacked. You got exposed. Even Ivy stayed silent. She was smart enough to know when silence is safer than spin. But the damage couldn't be spun. Not anymore. By Friday, TechCrunch, Bloomberg Tech and even Fast Company were covering the unraveling. Insight Vault was now trending. Not as a rising star, but as a case study in how ego and aesthetics destroy functionality. The headline that made me smile was from the information. The house that vanity built. How Ivy Hart and Mason Quinn burned $11 million in 14 months. Underneath, a photo of them, taken during their last panel appearance. She wore white. He looked tired. Caption read, "They sold a vision, but forgot to build a product." Privately I continued the leak. I posted an anonymous article on Medium titled, "The Collapse of Insight Vault," a former insider's account. Written as if from a developer on the team, it recounted the toxic culture, and Mason's shortcuts, Ivy's obsession with press, the fake advisors, the buried bugs, the staged launch. It spread fast. Someone reposted it to Hacker News with the title, "Tech Soap Opera, How Two Narcissists Tanked a Promising Startup." Comments poured in. I watched them late into the night. Some funny, some cruel, some disturbingly accurate, but all of them confirming one thing. No one trusted them anymore. On Sunday evening, SEC Compliance issued an inquiry. Not an investigation. Not yet. Just a request for preliminary disclosures. But the word was out. Fraud was now on the table. Ivy and Mason released a joint statement. We take compliance seriously and are cooperating fully with authorities to resolve any misconceptions. Our focus remains on serving our clients and team. The press ate it alive. One commentator on a finance podcast said, "When founders start calling investigations misconceptions, they've already lost the narrative." And they had. Inside Insight Vault, morale collapsed. The fake advisors I'd placed began backing away. One issued a statement saying she was unaware of internal misrepresentations and had resigned from all advisory capacity. Except she'd never been hired legally. He was never real. It didn't matter. The lie breaking apart made the truth more dangerous. Mason tried to rally the team. He called an emergency Zoom. 15 staff joined. 6 dropped off after he said the words, "We're pivoting." Someone leaked the video. A clip from it went viral. "This isn't a failure," Mason says, looking exhausted. "It's just misunderstood momentum." The internet tore him apart. "Please. Someone take his TED Talk license away." The most startup sentence I've ever heard. "You faked a product. Sit down." Ivy meanwhile was unraveling. She sent 2 rage-fueled emails internally that leaked within hours. In one she wrote, "Whoever's leaking is a coward. I built this company with my blood and bones. I will find you." She wouldn't. But she tried. She hired a private firm to trace the leaks. I let them. Then fed them 3 false leads, each one pointing to someone else. By the end of the week, they suspected 2 engineers, a PR manager and a junior contractor. None were me. None even knew who I was. That was the beauty of it. Then I made my first public move. Under the name Lena Carr, I issued a letter. Posted to Riverlight Equity's website. Forwarded to press. Shared with every investor on the leaked cap table. Given recent developments, Riverlight Equity is initiating full legal separation from Insight Vault and its founders. We consider prior disclosures to be in breach of trust. Effective immediately, we are exiting all partnership channels and terminating outstanding agreements. No signature. No apology. Just judgment. Clean and cold. Like the ending of a play. The tech world exploded. One newsletter called it the slowest car crash in Silicon Valley history. But I wasn't slowing down. I opened my black notebook. Crossed out. Silence. Leaks. Legal motion. PR destruction. Investor loss. Public trust collapse. Then wrote. Now deliver the name. Because after everything, it was finally time to show them exactly who had pulled every string. I invited them to lunch. A final meeting under the guise of one last clarification before full termination. They accepted. Of course they did. Desperation makes people polite. We met at a high-rise boardroom in downtown Manhattan, Riverlight's client-facing space, tastefully sparse and too expensive for what it offered. They arrived together. Ivy in all black, oversized sunglasses despite the rain. Mason in a jacket that hung a little too loose now, collar rumpled like he'd slept in it. They looked exhausted. "Lena," Mason said, attempting charm. "Thanks for agreeing to meet. We've been under siege lately." He forced a chuckle. I didn't smile. "I know," I said. "Have a seat." They did. I let silence settle for a beat too long. Then placed a slim black folder on the glass table between us. "What's this?" Ivy asked. I looked her in the eye. "Closure." She blinked. "Excuse me." I leaned back in my chair, crossing one leg over the other. "Before I leave your lives forever, I thought it might be satisfying, for me at least, for you to understand exactly how all this happened." Mason frowned. "We don't have time for riddles, Lena." I gave him the faintest smile. "No riddles, Mason. Just facts." I tapped the folder. "You might want to open that." He reached for it. Flipped the cover. The first page, a full-color printout of the wedding invite. My wedding. His name as the groom. Ivy's name in the guest list. His hand froze. Ivy leaned over. And paled. The next page was a screenshot of the email Ivy had sent me, the night they ran off to think things through. "You were always too nice, Elise. Mason needs a woman who can push him higher. You're the stepping stone, not the summit." Ivy's face drained of color. She looked at me. "How?" I tilted my head. "You don't recognize me?" Her eyes widened. "Fully. Painfully. She stammered. You're not, Lena? No, I said, voice flat. My name, I said softly, is Elise Caldwell. The silence was absolute. Even the AC seemed to pause. Mason finally spoke, voice low. Elise. I met his gaze. Yes. He looked sick. You, what the hell, how? I didn't let him spiral. Instead, I opened the folder further. Laid out each document like knives. A map of Riverlight's internal structure. Proof of the fake advisors I planted. Financial statements rerouted through shell companies. A media campaigns traced back to my ghostwriters. Audio clips of Ivy's podcast lies, time-stamped and highlighted. The SEC complaint I drafted personally. And finally, the company registration for Falcrest's latest acquisition. At the very end, Insight Vault Holdings acquired 94% controlling interest. Sole managing signatory, Elise Caldwell. Mason stared at the page. You bought us. I nodded. I bought you. He swallowed. With what? I looked at him, amused. Not with love. Not with tears. With money. And a little genius. Something you clearly underestimated. Ivy's lip trembled. This was all a revenge? No, I said, and meant it. This was correction. She rose from her chair. You're insane. Possibly, I said. But I'm also CEO of your company now. So let's be careful who we insult. Mason sat rigid, eyes unfocused. I leaned forward. You thought I'd cry. Beg. Move on. Heal quietly. I smiled coldly. You thought wrong. Ivy's voice broke. You destroyed us. I tilted my head. You destroyed yourselves. I just built the mirror and made sure the lights were bright enough for everyone to see. She stepped forward, trembling. What do you want? I stood. Collected the folder. You're no longer in a position to ask me anything. I turned to Mason. You fired me. He opened his mouth. You replaced me. He closed it. You built your future on my bones. And assumed I'd vanish. I paused. But I don't vanish, Mason. I moved closer. Just enough for him to smell the rose and smoke perfume he once said made me unforgettable. You gave my position to a woman who used to borrow my lip gloss, I said, voice quiet. Now I own the company you faked into existence. And you work for me. Ivy started to shake. This isn't legal. Oh, it's legal, I said. Perfectly so. And tomorrow when the acquisition is announced, your inbox will light up like a funeral pyre. She backed away. Mason just looked hollow. Like a man who suddenly remembered the storm he mocked now had a name. I opened the door to leave. But paused in the frame. Turn once more. Goodbye, Mason. He stood slowly, eyes desperate. Elise, wait, please. I held up a hand. The next time you speak my name, make sure it's in the past tense. And walked out. Outside, the sun had finally emerged. The clouds broke clean over the skyline, and for the first time in years, I felt no weight, no ache, no confusion about who I was. I was Elise Caldwell. And this was my return. Mason showed up on Monday in a tailored suit and hollow eyes. I assigned him to facilities. Officially, his new title was Executive Liaison for Structural Operations. Unofficially, it meant coordinating furniture orders, reviewing HVAC complaints, and signing off on fire extinguisher placements across 3 shared offices. He didn't argue. Just nodded, eyes cast down like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. I watched him walk out of my office with his shoulders a little lower than the day before. Not with pity. With precision. Ivy didn't return. She tried. She sent an email the morning after the reveal. Nice though. Lena, no, Miss Caldwell. She never finished the salutation. The body was even messier. Something between an apology and a tantrum, full of passive accusations. You were always so good at pretending to be humble. Mason never even loved you the way you think he did. You didn't win. You just waited longer to swing the knife. I replied with a single sentence. Per company policy, former contractors under investigation are not permitted back into the premises. And that was it. No press release. No drama. Just erasure. I didn't need her fired. I needed her forgotten. The week after, Insight Vault's employees returned with shoulders squared and breath held. Everyone had seen the headlines. Everyone whispered about what I'd done. But no one dared ask. Because power, when worn correctly, answers questions before they're spoken. I held an all-hands meeting that Thursday. Dressed in ink black. Hair pinned up like a crown. I stood at the front of the main conference room, hands resting lightly on the table Mason once leaned against when he pitched vapor to the world. He now sat in the third row, taking notes. I could feel his shame hanging like fog. Perfect. We begin again, I said. The room fell still. I am not here to clean up a mess. I'm here to build a system. I let the words echo, then offered the faintest smile. And for those who believe that being underestimated is weakness, let this company's rebirth be your reminder. Sometimes quiet people are just loading their next plan. The room exhaled in admiration. Mason didn't meet my eyes. I didn't ask him to. I gave him his first task later that day. Go to storage. Retrieve all archived press kits from Ivy's old campaigns. He stared at me. I met his gaze coldly. I want everyone catalogued, time-stamped, and marked for destruction. He opened his mouth, then closed it. And nodded. He spent the next 6 hours in a basement full of dying printouts and dusty boxes, surrounded by the artifacts of a fraud he helped build. I knew because I checked the security cameras, and watched as he sat down on an overturned crate, head in his hands. But I didn't feel triumphant. Not quite. Just balanced. At night I walked the halls. Insight Vault was silent after 9 p.m., except for the gentle humming of servers and a faint citrus cleaner lingering in the air. I found myself in the old executive office, the one Ivy had remodeled in her own image, all soft lighting and minimalist shelves full of books she never read. I stood in the doorway for a long while, then walked inside, and flipped the light switch. Nothing happened. She had installed voice-activated lighting. Power, I said aloud mockingly. The room stayed dark. Of course. It didn't recognize me, because I'd never spoken there as Elise. I walked back out, smiling faintly. The next morning I received a letter from Ivy's lawyer. My client wishes to resolve all reputational fallout amicably and privately. She is willing to sign an NDA and remove all public-facing material from her social platforms. I signed the agreement. Not for her protection. For mine. Because now if she ever spoke my name again in public, she'd owe me $10 million. Mason meanwhile fell into a rhythm. He showed up early. Did his tasks. Filed reports to my assistant without question. Never addressed me directly unless called upon. He was broken, but still intact enough to be useful. I made sure of it. Because this wasn't about destroying him. It was about changing the hierarchy forever. Midway through the month he knocked on my door. Come in, I said, not looking up. He stepped in slowly. Held a folder in both hands. Building maintenance inventory, he said. I took it. Thumbed through the pages. All in order? Yes. I nodded. He lingered. I looked up. What? He opened his mouth. Closed it. Then tried again. Was it all true? He asked softly. Everything you showed us? Yes, I said. And you never stopped watching? I closed the folder. No, Mason. I never stopped watching. He nodded once. Then whispered, I deserve this. I met his eyes for the first time in weeks. No, I said. You deserve worse. But I have better things to do. And turned back to my work. Later that night I sat alone in the boardroom with the city stretching like velvet behind me. Noah called. I hadn't spoken to him since the acquisition finalized. You did it, he said gently. Yes, I replied. He paused. And how does it feel? I looked at my reflection in the glass. So, capable. I feel clean, I said. He didn't say anything. But his silence was warm. I didn't cry that night. Didn't laugh either. Just sat quietly with the weight of victory. Because winning wasn't joy. It was equilibrium. And I had earned every inch of it. 3 months after I bought the company that tried to erase me, I threw a party in its lobby. Not for them. For me. The walls were washed in soft gold. Live jazz hummed from a tucked-away quartet. There were no step-and repeats. No press. Just my team. My staff. The real backbone of Insight Vault. The ones who stayed when the illusion fell away. Everyone was dressed in black and silver. I wore red. A shade Ivy once claimed only she could pull off. Now no one remembered her name. Mason wasn't there. He was still employed, technically, but I'd reassigned him quietly to a remote audit firm. No title, no forward-facing duties. No reason to stay in Manhattan. He'd taken the hint. I hadn't heard from him since. And that finally felt right. I stood on the mezzanine balcony, looking down at the room full of chatter and clinking glasses. People laughed. Genuinely. They weren't pretending to love a pitch deck. They weren't trying to impress a brand. They were alive. So was I. No armor. No edge. Just breath. Someone tapped my shoulder. I turned and smiled before I even registered the face. Noah. Button-down shirt rolled to the elbows. That same quiet confidence that had never tried to tame me. He handed me a glass of champagne. I took it. He raised his. To closure, he asked. I clinked gently. To reclamation. We drank. You didn't invite press, he said after a while, glancing at the room. I didn't need an audience. He nodded. That's the difference, huh? Between me and them? He looked at me. No, he said. Between winning and healing. I turned to the window. The skyline shimmered against the dark. For a long time, I said, I wanted to be seen. Just seen. By the people I gave everything to. And now. I smiled faintly. Now I see myself. That's enough. We moved to a quieter corner. Talked about books. Art. The ridiculous pizza place near my old apartment with the 7-cheese slice that never actually had 7 cheeses. I laughed. Not the polite kind. Real laugh. I couldn't remember the last time I let sound come out of my body without calculation. It felt like rain in drought. Noah looked at me carefully. Not like Mason used to, trying to figure out what he could say to keep control. But with genuine curiosity. What's next? He asked. I exhaled. I might sell the company, I said. Or maybe I'll scale it for real this time. Honestly, I don't know. He raised a brow. Elise Caldwell. Not knowing? I'm learning to like it. The night softened. People filtered out one by one. By midnight it was just a handful of us. I stayed. Alone. Not because I had to. But as I chose to. I wandered to the glass atrium where Insight Vault's motto still glowed in silver. Predict tomorrow, perfect today. I laughed under my breath. What a lie. Tomorrow can't be predicted. But it can be prepared for. And I was prepared now. For anything. I stepped outside into the night air. Cool. Free. I looked up at the city skyline, the pulsing lights, the noise that used to make me feel small. Now I belonged to it. No longer as a woman rebuilding herself from ashes. But as the storm that reshaped the sky. Noah joined me on the steps. You know, he said quietly, I never understood why you disappeared back then. I glanced at him. I didn't disappear, I said. I just stopped explaining myself. He nodded, hands in his pockets. Does this mean you're done with revenge? I thought for a moment. Then said, I was done the moment I walked away from them and didn't look back. He smiled. Not in awe. Not in sympathy. Just in understanding. Then maybe, he said, it's time to start writing a different kind of story. I didn't answer. Just turned toward the street. And walked forward. He fell into step beside me. No ownership. No chase. Just possibility. The end.